Welcome to the jail. 1878. You know, that would have been the front entrance right there. The front entrance of the jail, when of course the families lived here, being the sheriff's family lived here. When this jail was built for that purpose, the reason for that is that the person who was really pushing for that was upset with the fact that jails are places where they would put everybody of all ages into the same cells, no matter what they had done. And he thought, that's not right. He said younger offenders in there with convicted murderers, and he thought, this has to be changed. And he thought one way it could change is if the sheriff's family actually lived at the jail so they knew what was going on right there. The person who suggested doing that, who insisted on doing that, was a man by the name of Rutherford B. Hayes. He was the one who brought that about when he was governor of Ohio. This wasn't built until he was president. Was he ever in here? Probably not. But he came back a lot after he was president, and no doubt drove by and saw the style of jail around Ohio, right in his own hometown, that was just what he had suggested right here. And no doubt saw the old courthouse with the Civil War statue where he had fought the Civil War out in front of it. But anyway, the families that lived here, around 19 sheriff's families lived in this jail. And the last one to live here was a sheriff by the name of Eugene Jackson. Eugene Jackson lived here with his family. Now, he was here from about 1965 to the early 1970s. And the next sheriff, Bill Avery, the jail was still here, but he didn't live here. He was the first sheriff not to live in the jail with his family. He didn't live in here anymore. The way the rooms are set up, we can't go in those rooms because there's a judge's office right here, one of the judges, her office is here, and there's another office in there. Now, if you would be able to go in there, that front room was the living room. This room was the dining room. Kitchen right behind it. And then the next room we'll go in here in a minute and see it too, as part of the living quarters in here. Couple incidents. I heard this from a lady who a few years ago was telling me this. Her name is Marge Rutherford, and she's in her 90s now. And she said, I lived in that jail. She said, my father, Sheriff Lambert, when I was a little girl, of course my name was Lambert. She said, he lived there, we lived there in this house, and he was the sheriff. And she said, I was just a little girl, and I liked to go downtown to get candy. And of course, we're close to the main street. But my parents thought that I was far too young to be able to go down there by myself. And if they got busy, they didn't have time to take me down there. This sounds like that old show, Mayberry. She said, my father would go back and get a prisoner out and say, my daughter wants to get some candy, would you take her downtown? I don't have time. Take her downtown and buy her some, get her some candy, and give you some money, and then come back and lock yourself in the prison, in the jail.
Oh my gosh.
And I,
Very trusting.
oh my, and she said, but they weren't serious criminals. She said they were townspeople that people knew, you know, and that knew which ones were trustworthy, you know, and they said, there were any problems, she said, but that would happen more than once. Another one was this. There was a man a few years ago, I met him at the fair one year. I was up there with the Historical Society booth, and he was back from Arizona. He had lived here in Delaware as a child, had no relatives here anymore, but he always liked to come back for the Delaware County Fair. And so every year he would come back. We got to talking, and he said, you remember when up by the jail, up there in that lawn, behind the courthouse, how they used to have band concerts in the summer? He said, and families would bring their picnics there and sit out on the lawn and listen to the concert. And he said, being a kid, I wasn't too interested in the band. I was more interested just looking around. And he said, I was sitting there by my father, and he said, I said to my dad, I looked up the back of the jail, and there were some people up there, and I said to my dad, I think the prisoners are escaping. And my dad laughed. He said, tell the sheriff he's sitting right over here, and tell him they're escaping. And of course, figured that there were workers up there doing some work. And I said, no, I'm not going to tell the sheriff. He said, no, go and tell the sheriff. I said, no. And he said, and I didn't. Next day in the headlines of the paper, while the people were distracted by the band, the prisoners were escaping to the roof. And he said, we talked about that for the rest of his life, about how if I had just told the sheriff. But, I can think of one other incident, and this I found in the newspaper years ago, about they were having some escapes from the jail. And the sheriff, during that time, it had happened 2 or 3 times. And in less than just a very few months, there had been escapes. And one time the prisoner was escaping, and he got out, and it was early in the morning, and the sheriff said that the prisoner took down the alley, right back here, headed north up the alley, and as the paper described it, and the sheriff was giving chase. He was barefoot, his feet covered with dew. The straps of his pants were dangling at the side. His hair was bedeviled, in other words, a mess. And he's a huffing and puffing like Claypool's threshing machine crossing the Ashley Bridge. But he caught him. He caught him and brought him back. Let's step in here and see this room. This is another part.